In this podcast episode, filmmaker Jenner Furst delves into the intricate web of events surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic, the role of Dr. Anthony Fauci, and the implications of secret Chinese biotech programs. Furst's documentary, titled Thank You, Dr. Fauci, aims to shed light on the controversial aspects of the pandemic and the potential consequences for those involved in its origins. Furst begins by addressing the origins of the COVID-19 virus, asserting that it did not emerge from the wet market in Wuhan, as widely reported. Instead, he suggests that the virus likely originated from a laboratory leak, possibly as early as August 2019. This assertion is based on a combination of intelligence reports and circumstantial evidence, including unusual activity at the Wuhan lab prior to the outbreak. Furst emphasizes that the narrative surrounding the virus's origins has been manipulated to obscure the truth, which he believes is critical for understanding the pandemic's impact. He further explains that the research conducted at the Wuhan lab was funded by the United States, raising questions about the ethical implications of such funding. Furst argues that the U.S. government had been aware of the potential risks associated with gain-of-function research for years, yet continued to support it. This negligence, he claims, has led to a catastrophic global health crisis, with millions of lives lost and economies devastated. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, NIAID, is a central figure in Furst's documentary. Furst contends that Fauci's long-standing influence in public health policy has allowed him to evade accountability for his actions during the pandemic. He argues that Fauci's decisions, particularly regarding the funding of risky research, have had dire consequences for public health. Furst believes that Fauci's position has shielded him from scrutiny, despite evidence suggesting he may have committed perjury before Congress. Furst also highlights the paradox of Fauci being celebrated in affluent communities while facing criticism in others. He points out that the "Thank You, Dr. Fauci" signs were predominantly found in wealthy, well-educated neighborhoods, suggesting a disconnect between the experiences of different socioeconomic groups during the pandemic. This disparity, according to Furst, reflects a broader issue of how public health messaging has been received and interpreted across various demographics. The podcast delves into the politicization of COVID-19 and how it has shaped public perception of the virus and its origins. Furst notes that the pandemic has become a battleground for political ideologies, with both sides using the crisis to further their agendas. He argues that this division has hindered meaningful discussions about the virus and its implications, as people are more focused on political allegiances than on the truth. Furst expresses his frustration with the current political climate, stating that he has lost confidence in traditional political narratives. He believes that the manipulation of information surrounding COVID-19 has exposed the flaws in the political system, revealing how easily public opinion can be swayed by powerful interests. This realization has led him to adopt a more skeptical view of politics as a whole, as he sees the pandemic as a reflection of deeper systemic issues. A significant portion of the discussion revolves around gain-of-function research, which involves manipulating viruses to enhance their transmissibility or virulence. Furst explains that this type of research has been controversial for years, with many scientists warning about the potential risks. He argues that Fauci and others violated regulations to fund such research in Wuhan, despite knowing the dangers it posed. Furst emphasizes that the scientific community had been raising alarms about the risks associated with gain-of-function research long before the pandemic. He believes that the failure to heed these warnings has contributed to the current crisis. By highlighting the reckless nature of this research, Furst aims to underscore the need for greater oversight and accountability in scientific endeavors. Furst critiques the mainstream media's handling of the COVID-19 narrative, arguing that it has played a significant role in shaping public perception. He contends that major news outlets have often prioritized sensationalism over factual reporting, leading to widespread misinformation. This, he believes, has contributed to the public's confusion and fear surrounding the virus. He also points out that the media's reliance on government sources, such as Fauci, has created a feedback loop that reinforces the official narrative. Furst argues that this dynamic has stifled dissenting voices and alternative viewpoints, making it difficult for the public to access a comprehensive understanding of the pandemic. He calls for a more critical approach to media consumption, urging individuals to seek out diverse perspectives. The podcast discusses the broader societal implications of the COVID-19 pandemic, particularly its effects on mental health and social cohesion. Furst notes that the isolation and fear generated by the pandemic have taken a toll on individuals' well-being, leading to increased rates of anxiety and depression. He argues that the public health response, which often emphasized fear and compliance, has exacerbated these issues. Furst also highlights the long-term consequences of the pandemic on social structures, particularly in marginalized communities. He believes that the lockdowns and restrictions disproportionately affected those already facing economic hardships, further entrenching existing inequalities. This, he argues, underscores the need for a more equitable approach to public health policy moving forward. As the conversation shifts to the future of public health, Furst expresses concern about the potential for future pandemics and the lessons that have yet to be learned from COVID-19. He argues that the same systems that failed to prevent the current crisis are still in place, raising the risk of another outbreak. Furst emphasizes the importance of transparency and accountability in public health decision-making to prevent similar disasters in the future. He also calls for a reevaluation of the relationship between government agencies and pharmaceutical companies, arguing that the current model prioritizes profit over public health. Furst believes that a more collaborative approach, focused on genuine public health outcomes, is essential for building resilience against future health crises. Furst discusses the influence of pharmaceutical companies on public health policy, highlighting the significant financial interests at play. He argues that the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the extent to which these companies can shape policy decisions and public perception. Furst believes that the close ties between government agencies and the pharmaceutical industry have compromised the integrity of public health initiatives. He emphasizes the need for greater scrutiny of pharmaceutical companies and their practices, particularly regarding vaccine development and distribution. Furst argues that the current system allows for conflicts of interest that can undermine public trust in vaccines and other medical interventions. He calls for a more transparent and accountable approach to pharmaceutical regulation. Throughout the podcast, Furst underscores the importance of truth in public discourse, particularly in the context of the pandemic. He argues that the manipulation of information has led to widespread confusion and mistrust among the public. Furst believes that acknowledging the truth about COVID-19 and its origins is essential for rebuilding trust in public health institutions. He encourages listeners to engage in open and honest conversations about the pandemic, emphasizing that understanding the complexities of the situation is crucial for moving forward. Furst believes that by confronting uncomfortable truths, society can begin to heal and work towards a more equitable and just public health system. Furst concludes the podcast by calling for accountability for those involved in the pandemic's origins and response. He argues that individuals like Fauci must be held responsible for their actions, particularly if they have misled the public or engaged in unethical practices. Furst believes that accountability is essential for restoring trust in public health institutions and ensuring that similar mistakes are not repeated in the future. He emphasizes that the documentary Thank You, Dr. Fauci aims to expose the truth and encourage a broader conversation about the pandemic and its implications. Furst hopes that by shining a light on these issues, he can contribute to a more informed and engaged public, ultimately leading to meaningful change in the way public health is approached.